So like if we're craving chocolate, it could just be indicative of lower magnesium stores because we run through that more rapidly during these phases. It's a feel-good food.
This is On Nutrition, a podcast from Mayo Clinic where we dig into the latest nutrition trends and research to help you understand what's health and what's hype. I'm Tara Schmidt, a registered dietitian with Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. This episode, the menstrual cycle. And we're not just talking about the phases. We're talking about every little question that can pop up if you have ovaries. Like, why do I have more bowel movements during my period? How scared should I be of gaining weight during menopause? And do I need to stop using plastic cutting boards so I don't get PCOS? Here to help us understand our uterus and master our menopause is Danielle Cahalan, lead dietitian at All Access Dietitians, a virtual service specializing in women's health. Danielle helps clients support hormonal balance and eat well throughout all phases of life. Hi, Danielle. Thank you for joining me on Nutrition today.
Hi, Tara. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to learn more from you that I haven't already learned. One phrase that has gotten really big in the last few years, especially on social media, I think, is cycle syncing. Not with other people or like on my dance team. I feel like in high school, we all had synced cycles. But what we're talking about is the practice of catering your diet, your exercise, lifestyle around the different phases of your menstrual cycle. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us, what are those phases? And is this practice actually rooted in science?
Yeah, this is a great place to start. I think cycle syncing skyrocketed in popularity in recent years. And so cycle syncing isn't a clinical term. So as an entire practice, it hasn't been studied in its effectiveness. But there are a lot of components of cycle syncing that are science-based. When we're talking about the 4 phases of the cycle, it starts with day 1 of our period. And a healthy period usually lasts between 2 and 8 days in length. If it's shorter than 2 days or longer than 8 days, it's usually good to get that checked out just to make sure there's no underlying issues. And then after your period ends, the first day after that marks the start of your follicular phase. And then we have our ovulation. So the ovulatory phase only lasts for about 24 hours, but a woman could be fertile for up to 5 to 6 days. And then we head into our luteal phase, the 4th phase. And the luteal phase, contrary to what people feel or experience, it's not just the week before your period, it's actually 2 full weeks before. And I'm sure women are just like, oh, like 2 weeks, like instead of 1. That's so much longer. Why? But it's the 2 weeks marking after ovulation up into when people start menstruating. And so the luteal phase can span between anywhere from 12 to 16 days in length. And that's the 4 phases. So menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulatory, and luteal.
So if we visualized the menstrual cycle like a pie chart, the follicular phase and luteal phases would each be about a fourth. The menstrual cycle would be a little bit smaller, and the ovulatory phase would be like a tiny sliver since it takes the shortest amount of time.
Exactly.
So what's going on in that follicular phase besides having more energy and less bloating since it's right after your period?
Yeah. So the follicular phase is usually when estrogen is slowly rising to then peak at ovulation to release an egg for that cycle. And so if we think about like how we can support that estrogen in our body, it's really getting enough phytoestrogens in our diet. Phyto meaning plant, estrogen is the hormone. Those come from foods such as yams, oats, berries, nuts, and seeds. So a little bit lighter of foods, which is really supportive of that phase in your body. And then also enough fiber. A lot of people don't realize, but estrogen is secreted from the ovaries, but it's also metabolized and regulated in our gut. And in having enough fiber and probiotics in your diet, it can also support estrogen metabolism.
I think every single episode of this podcast, we have lectured people to eat more fiber. So like, if you haven't gotten it yet, people, we need more fiber.
Always. Yes.
It's going to like be on my gravestone. How do these phases, if they do at all, impact the way that we crave or maybe process food? Like, is chocolate craving a real thing? Did we just make that up like from a movie, or it's real?
I am picturing like Natalie Portman on the couch, like Eating Chocolate to Bleeding Love. I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
Yes, the period playlist in No Strings Attached.
Yes. So when we're thinking about chocolate, very common to crave specifically chocolate during the luteal and period phases. There's a couple reasons why. One can be an overt need for more magnesium in the body.
Okay.
It's really interesting because our body tells us what it needs. So like if we're craving chocolate, it could just be indicative of lower magnesium stores because we run through that more rapidly during these phases. So replenishing with magnesium-rich foods such as like avocado, nuts and seeds, beans and lentils, and my favorite, chocolate. It's a fun one to recommend. Dark chocolate in particular is more concentrated in magnesium. And so if you're someone who prefers milk chocolate, of course, all foods fit in moderation, but just for the sake of getting more magnesium, dark chocolate 70% and higher is probably the best option. And then other reasons that you may crave chocolate during this phase is it's a feel-good food. Like
Yeah.
who doesn't like the taste of chocolate and how that makes you feel after?
Exactly.
And then the last explanation could be blood sugar regulation of just craving something a little sugary and like a sweet treat, which is totally fine and valid during that time too. During our period, we're a little more insulin sensitive. So we actually require a little bit more complex carbs, even simple sugars from time to time to keep our blood sugar regulated.
I think Danielle's going to be everyone's favorite dietitian. She's like, so good, everyone.
Eat more chocolate. Yes.
Eat that cupcake. Listen to your period playlist.
Right. Exactly.
So there's a lot of talk online about the luteal phase in particular, when a lot of us are feeling kind of off, maybe having trouble sleeping or dealing with PMS. Do you think people tend to unintentionally overeat or undereat during this phase?
100%. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, especially because so many people who experience their menstrual cycle will report overeating during their luteal phase.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they feel like they have lack of willpower. They blame themselves and go into that shame spiral of overeating.
Yes.
And it's a physiological change during this time, completely normal. Most studies show that women eat about 100 to 300 calories more per day during this phase of the cycle. A couple reasons could be at play here. One, we're more insulin resistant. It's harder to process carbs and sugar, so our bodies just crave more energy through food. Progesterone's higher, which can increase appetite, as well as body temperature, which can increase your basal metabolic rate or resting metabolic rate.
Yeah.
So your metabolism increases. Some women may have difficulty sleeping, and so that can also increase cravings and caloric intake the next day.
Yes.
There's so many things at play. So I just want, people to know that it is completely normal to eat a little bit more during this phase.
Are there specific nutrients or foods that you recommend people intentionally target during that luteal phase?
I would say magnesium is at the top that we usually investigate and recommend just because it's the calming mineral. So it really makes people feel better during this phase. Magnesium, going back to those magnesium-rich foods, supplementation not exceeding 425 to 450 milligrams a day.
Okay.
I think that's important to note because sometimes people will get it from electrolyte packets or magnesium foods and then a supplement on top of it. And it can be an easy overload pretty quickly. But then also another fun and innovative way is getting it transdermally or through the skin. So if you're a bath person, and really enjoy that and relaxing, Epsom salts. Usually I recommend to look for one with no fragrance because that can interfere with hormones to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
But fragrance-free Epsom salts or magnesium-infused lotions or oils are really lovely on the body just to get a little more magnesium. And it bypasses the digestive tract, so it goes directly into your bloodstream for quick absorption. So you can rub that at the bottom of your feet or lower abdomen during this luteal phase. And a lot of women feel better by doing that.
Yeah, and that just sounds relaxing, especially if you're not feeling well or just kind of a treat yourself
Exactly.
type moment.
During the luteal phase, we become more catabolic, meaning we're in a state of breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
And this is important to note just because we want to preserve muscle mass during this phase. And if you're someone who's actively trying to maintain and or build muscle, getting a little more protein and or amino acids like leucine during this phase is going to be very supportive of that. In addition, I usually survey my clients that I work with, what are your main concerns during this phase? And the two reports that I get are difficulty sleeping and then also mood dips or swings. And so difficulty sleeping can be supported with melatonin-rich foods like kiwi at night is really rich in melatonin, and or tart cherry juice, if you've heard of like the sleepy girl mocktails and things that people got into. And then tryptophan. Tryptophan, most people think turkey,
I was going to say
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Yes, makes you sleepy. It almost has a sedative effect. And so it makes you tired. It's really good with supporting sleep, but also mood. It's a precursor to serotonin. And when progesterone dips during this phase, so does serotonin. So having a little more tryptophan-rich foods can be very supportive if you're someone who struggles with mood swings. So you can get that from foods like turkey, other poultry like chicken, duck, cheese, yogurt, and all of those can be eaten whenever, but it's really great to time it maybe at night for dinner or a bedtime snack.
When we're menstruating, how important is iron, knowing that we're obviously losing blood?
So when we're bleeding, in the blood, there are iron stores. Usually, on average, women lose about 1.6 milligrams per period, which we can recover from pretty quickly, but it can be helpful to be mindful of replenishing those iron stores through food. So thinking red meat is a really concentrated source. Second to that would be poultry. If you're thinking more of like those plant-based iron sources, maybe lentils, beans, some nuts and seeds have lower levels, some dried fruit, quinoa, spinach as well. So yeah, I think it is important to just prioritize and be a little bit more mindful of iron during this time. It can even be more beneficial to what I call preload before
Yeah.
or prioritize iron a little bit more in that later luteal phase to get ahead of it. Because sometimes if you're already bleeding and losing the iron, you're already feeling low in energy. So it can be helpful to build up those iron stores prior to that.
When we're talking about food, do you think that those can have enough of an impact to do something like prevent anemia? Or is that more of just a biological, like you're more likely to have anemia or not?
I think some people are more at risk for anemia if you have a history, a family history. If you have heavy bleeding due to endometriosis or other conditions, you may be more at risk for that. And if you are, and it's just like temporary and induced by your menstrual phase or period, it could be helpful to temporarily supplement around that time. Another really fun way of getting iron in your diet indirectly is by using a cast iron skillet or even those lucky fish. I don't know if you've seen the lucky iron fish that you can put in a glass of water, a boiling pot of water, or like any type of cooking. And either mode transfers that iron up to 6 times the amount into food, whether it's iron containing or not. My clients love that tip because sometimes it's overwhelming for people to keep track of what they're consuming in their diet.
Okay, I have to ask. And I hate this word. You probably know what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Tara, grow up. Period poops. What is happening?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, the infamous period poops. And, you know, a lot of clients will get embarrassed or...
I got embarrassed asking you the question. This is a real thing, though. Like, this is legit.
This is real. People experience it. You're not alone. So period poops can feel like loose stools or diarrhea during this time. And it's caused by, if you think about the uterus contracting, that's what causes the cramps and dispelling of the blood. So that's what helps us bleed. And what causes those uterine contractions are what are called prostaglandins. They're a fat-like compound. And so it's good in small amounts because we need to get that blood out of our system. But it becomes more painful. We experience these period poops when prostaglandins are a little bit higher or we're sensitive to them. So if you think about where the uterus is, it's very close to all the digestive organs. So if that's contracting, it could, in close proximity, cause contractions of the digestive organs, causing the urgency or a need to go to the bathroom. So this happens.
Are there strategies, especially if anyone's like dealing with menstrual diarrhea, I've even read about? Are there ways that we should be adapting our diet?
There are 2 ways to intervene here. There's one to get ahead of it. So getting ahead of it in previous phases of your cycle. So maybe reducing omega-6s in the diet through fried foods, excessive anything that would be inflammatory, like added sugars. There are certain
Ultra
foods that
processed
contain,
foods.
that contain higher omega-6 ratios. But then in the moment, it could be helpful to consume more soluble fiber, which slows down GI transit and will help like slow down the process of that urgent need to go to the bathroom.
When we talk about fatigue and diet, are you more so recommending people just eat more on a regular basis, like make sure that they have balanced meals, maybe they're snacking a little bit more often? Any advice that you give related to diet and fatigue?
Yeah. So, of course, we need fuel for energy. So, making sure you're eating adequately at baseline every 3 to 4 hours minimum, especially because we are more insulin sensitive and need more carb replenishment during that time. So, if you go much longer than 4 hours of eating, you can experience a low blood sugar episode, and that can cause hanger, which we don't love, and low energy. But really making sure that you're replenishing your iron for oxygen delivery, that helps with energy. B vitamins can convert food into energy. An interesting one is prioritizing citrus fruits because aromatherapy, there's a lot of evidence showing that the citrus aroma can really have this awakening, refreshing effect. And then also at baseline, people tend to forget about the basics. So, like hydration and electrolytes are really important here. A lot of women report feeling bloated during their period, and water, even though that sounds counterintuitive to putting more in your body, can help with that processing and releasing that fluid.
Another symptom that I think people struggle with, especially around menstruation, is fatigue. No one feels like exercising when they're tired. But I think this is a strategy not only for fatigue, but also for pain and cramping. Is that right?
You don't need to push yourself. But at the same time, even doing light, gentle movement, there's like pillow yoga that's laying on a pillow and kind of stretching because the uterus is a muscle. And people tend to forget about that. So it's almost just stretching out that muscle to alleviate the cramps. But then even going for a light walk can increase circulation to the uterus, and that can alleviate some of the pain.
Let's talk about exercising for the phases of your menstrual cycle. Is it meaningful, or are we just trying to get people to exercise, period?
Yes and no. And so here's why yes. With cycle syncing, the recommendations are during your period, recovery activity. As you get closer to ovulation, more intense cardio, HIIT training. Ovulation, same. And then luteal phase, more strength and resistance training. While that's great in theory to support your body and hormone fluctuations, every individual is different with where their hormones are at and how they're feeling based on other variabilities and factors in their life. Maybe their mental health is low during their ovulation phase, or if they don't feel like it, that's okay.
I'm just trying to get to the gym any day, okay? So like, I don't need someone being like, wait, it's not a gym day. I'm like, no, this is the only day. I don't have 10 meetings. So give yourself grace, please, to just exercise.
Whenever works for you. And it doesn't have to be a type of exercise, because going back to the word sustainability, find an activity that you do like to match your energy and mood that day. I mean, there are women who are debilitated during their periods and can't work out for 7 days. If that's the case, that is the status you're in and what you're working with. The underlying message is listen to your body.
So, cycle syncing is the idea of tailoring your diet, exercise, and lifestyle around the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. While cycle syncing itself isn't a clinical term, many of its components are backed by science. The menstrual, follicular, ovulatory, and luteal phases can affect everything from energy levels to cravings. When it comes to diet, nutrient needs fluctuate depending on the phase. During the follicular phase after your period, lighter foods rich in phytoestrogens and fiber, like oats, berries, and seeds, can support estrogen balance. Cravings for chocolate during the luteal or menstrual phases are totally valid and often indicate a real need for magnesium. People may also find themselves eating more during the luteal phase right before they menstruate, not because of a sweet tooth, but because their metabolism and appetite naturally increase. Lean into these changes instead of fighting them. Use nutrient-dense foods for magnesium, protein, and iron to feel balanced and energized. If you're experiencing period poops, reducing inflammatory foods or adding soluble fiber may help. And for fatigue and cramps, gentle movement like restorative yoga or walking can improve circulation and relieve discomfort. Even simple things like hydrating or sniffing citrus can lift your energy and mood. Instead of seeing your cycle as something to suffer through, syncing with it can help you feel more in tune with your body. All that said, eventually periods will slow down and some days stop, though that time comes with its own challenges. Let's talk about perimenopause and menopause and what this means, especially for our nutrition. So let's take a few steps back and define perimenopause and menopause.
So perimenopause, a lot of women question, am I in it?
Yeah.
I've had clients ask me, should I go to the doctor and get checked? And usually you can just indicate this yourself. If you start experiencing irregular periods or shorter or longer cycles, usually that are alternating, it's different for every person, that can indicate your entry into perimenopause. But this isn't a fast track to menopause. I think a lot of
10
people
years,
start,
right?
yes,
Can
people
we
start
get
freaking
perimenopause
out
for
like,
10
oh my
years?
gosh, I'm getting hot flashes. It's going to happen overnight. No, it can start as early as 35. Usually the average is 40 to 45 years old when the onset of perimenopause occurs. And you're right, it can last up to 10 years, which is a
Oh my
long
God.
time. I know.
Don't
Yes.
sign me up for this.
It's going to happen to us all. 50% of the population, at least. We can't evade it. And then menopause is marked by the cessation or end of your period after 12 consecutive months. So if you don't get your period for 12 months in a row, that usually indicates that you're in menopause officially.
How do you help a client adapt their diet, whether they're in perimenopause or menopause?
Yeah, we start prioritizing a few things. So, one, blood sugar regulation. We really have a really solid conversation on how to support their blood sugar. Blood sugar, so in the transition to perimenopause and menopause, we become more insulin resistant. There's that phrase again. It's harder to process carbs and sugar. And that excess blood sugar can get stored as fat on the body, which we'll talk about, but really prioritizing blood sugar. And usually that increases energy too, and vitality and how you feel. In addition to that, strength or resistance training, it's interesting because a lot of women go to like powerlifting or strength training
Like
in their mind.
barbells, like
Yes.
chest press.
It doesn't need to be that intense. Sometimes
Yeah.
you can just start with like a weighted vest or those cool bala bands that you walk around with. And those create more like body weight resistance for the person, which counts as resistance training. I know Legree or Reformer Pilates is getting popular. That's a form of resistance training, or strength bands. There are other options for you. If you are fearful or intimidated by lifting or that's not your thing, there are other options with strength and resistance training. And then to build muscle, we need enough protein or those building blocks. So really acknowledging the increased protein needs during perimenopause and menopause.
So, like you've mentioned, we have talked a lot about insulin resistance, and you mentioned fat storage. So is this the conversation of I'm gaining weight in my midsection? And sometimes people don't even have a change in their, what I would say, their gravitational pull. Like the weight on the scale has not changed, but their clothes are fitting different. They feel like they're storing fat differently. Are we blaming insulin resistance for this? I need to blame someone. So I just need.
Yeah, it's really sad because sometimes we get to this age in life and it's just like hands in the air. Oh, this is just what happens, and kind of giving up in a way. And it doesn't have to be that way. We just need to learn how to work with our body through these changes in life. And insulin resistance does happen. That's something we can talk about and work with when it comes to weight management in perimenopause and menopause, in addition to building muscle. So building muscle is going to support that baseline metabolism. Usually when we onboard clients in our program, we recommend that they go get a body composition test and analysis just to see the ratio of fat to muscle in their body. Because to your point, the weight on the scale, the number on the scale might not change. But I've seen it happen where the number doesn't change. The person is very defeated. They get a second body comp.
Yes.
And then in relation to their initial one, they've increased in muscle and decreased in fat. And so I think that's more important to focus on than just the number on the scale.
Let's address the age-old question that I think you and I have both heard from clients of, does menopause itself cause weight gain? Is this more
Mm.
related to age? Is this more related to metabolism?
Hmm.
Because I think menopause, it tends to be a time where people recognize more challenges with maintaining a weight, maintaining body composition, etc. Where's this coming from?
This is an interesting one to unpack. So, on average, women in this phase of life gain about 1.5 pounds per year. And so there's this question of my weight is increasing. What is the culprit? The only thing could be menopause, right? Well, the underlying secondary issues is that insulin resistance that we can address. And then also with estrogen declining in this phase of life, our body wants to hold on to fat more. Estrogen's usually secreted from the ovaries. And when that stops happening, our body is really seeking where else can I get estrogen from? And fat cells secrete estrogen, which is fascinating. And a lot of these conversations I have, people are just amazed like, oh, my body is trying to protect itself because estrogen is protective. It's heart protective. It's bone health protective. There are so many protective qualities. So our body is trying to keep up and produce this. So it holds on to the fat on our bodies. We can work on that body composition through blood sugar management, strength and resistance training, optimal protein. There are other ways to support your body.
And I think another thing that I've seen a lot in research is simply that, like, we don't get more active as we age. So whether or not we want to talk about your metabolism, quote unquote, decreasing as we age, which we're not really sure it's that impactful, if you continue to eat the same number of calories, male or female, and you're not exercising more, which you're not likely doing as you reach an older age, there's a pound or a pound and a half or two in a year. And that's not a big deal. But after
Yeah,
10 or 20 years, it can be
it adds
significant.
up.
So I think it's just part of aging, especially if you're not changing your activity.
Yeah, it's good to normalize to a degree, but also knowing that there are interventions. And something else we talked about before is a lot of people will say like, oh, I hit my 30s or 40s and my metabolism is just shut. It's just slowed down. And a lot of research shows that your basal metabolism, it slows down gradually over time, but it's not going to significantly change until about 60 years old, which is much later in life.
Yeah.
So that's another side note there.
And I know that you don't prescribe, of course, given your scope of practice, but what do you tell clients when they ask you about hormone replacement therapy?
It is outside of my scope of practice, so I can't recommend it. I can't diagnose or tell someone to take it. However, I work with a lot of clients who I work with them before starting HRT and after, and there's a night and day difference in their mental health, their vitality, their biomarkers. I think it could be very beneficial for the right type of people if there's no contraindication. So, no reproductive cancers in their family or for them individually. There may be some contraindications with other medications that they're on too. So, always good to talk to their provider. But it can be with HRT, going back to how estrogen is protective for long term health with heart health, diabetes prevention, bone health, all of these things, it can be favorable for some women. And there's recent studies that came out kind of debunking the 20 years ago how HRT was harmful and
Yeah.
bad because we shouldn't put external hormones in our body. But they're finding it's quite the opposite for a lot of women now.
And you're going to have a very detailed conversation with your medical provider about your concerns. And I know that most providers, if you're going to your primary care, for example, if they don't feel comfortable, in a perfect world, they would refer you to someone who is comfortable. So I don't want
Exactly.
women to be afraid of to start to ask the questions and learn more. Speaking of, where would you point listeners if they wanted a credible resource to learn more about this type of information?
Yes, I think more the merrier when it comes to advocating for yourself or other providers, like advocating for you to have discussions with other professionals. So thank you for saying that about HRT. And then when it comes to resources, I really like the ACOG, so the American College of Obstetricians and
Mhm.
Gynecologists. They're a verified, credible source, as well as menopause.org. I was scouring their website and there's a lot of great patient handouts and information on there, including HRT.
I think another trend that's a little bit worrisome for me, or I'm just not sure how deeply rooted in research it is our ability to balance our own estrogen levels. So is this something that the average person should be concerned about? I was asked about estrogen-safe foods. Like, what does all this mean?
Yeah, when there was a lot of buzz of the quote unquote phrase balancing hormones, there's a lot
Yes.
of controversy, especially in the medical field, because medical professionals don't really acknowledge that as a thing. Same thing with endocrinologists. When we're thinking about estrogen, for the average person, we don't have to worry about it, especially going back to that F word, fiber. Where is estrogen metabolized and detoxified in the body? Our liver. If we're not getting enough fiber, drinking excessive alcohol, and there's a burden on the liver, yes, that might put you at risk for estrogen imbalances, whether that's
Okay.
low or high. But for the average person, if we're living life in balance and moderation, you're A-okay. You don't have to worry about that.
Perimenopause can start as early as the mid-30s, often marked by irregular or changing cycles, and can last up to a decade before menopause officially begins. During these years, hormone fluctuations can cause hot flashes, mood swings, and changes in metabolism. Menopause, which starts after 12 straight months without a period, brings further hormonal shifts, especially lower estrogen, which affects everything from energy levels to bone health and fat distribution. So, how can you adjust? It'll be more important to regulate your blood sugar. Estrogen decline can make the body more insulin resistant, meaning carbs and sugar are harder to process. You can also slow weight gain by prioritizing protein and strength training. But don't fret too much over gaining weight in your midsection. It's not just about willpower. It's also your body's way of trying to protect itself when estrogen levels drop. Hormone replacement therapy can be beneficial for some, improving heart, bone, and metabolic health. So don't be afraid to ask your provider if it might be right for you. Now that we understand the general changes someone with a uterus can expect to go through, let's talk about how to treat two conditions that you or a loved one could also face: PCOS and endometriosis. I really want to make sure that while we're talking about the menstrual cycle, we also talk about very common diagnoses like PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. Can you explain what that is and what some of the symptoms are?
It affects so many people. So about 7 to 10% of people with uteruses experience PCOS. And PCOS is a hormone condition. The cause is unknown. I think that's really important to note here too, because a lot of people will self-blame. I ate too much sugar, right? I caused this PCOS. It's from trauma. No, there's no definitive pathophysiology or cause of PCOS. And PCOS is diagnosed by meeting 2 of 3 criteria. 1 being irregular periods, 2 being elevated androgens, which are male sex hormones. The most common one is testosterone, people are familiar with. And 3 are identifying cysts on the ovaries. These cysts are a little bit different. People think of like additional growths on the ovaries, and those are different kinds of cysts. These polycystic ovaries in PCOS are more so immature follicles that haven't ovulated, that usually like harden and create these like cysts of sorts. And those can be seen in an intravaginal ultrasound, usually from your OB.
How do we treat PCOS from a medical standpoint? And also, I know that I've gotten this question a lot from a nutritional or medical nutritional therapy perspective.
A lot of times when you see a provider, they may start someone on metformin, which is a medication used to treat insulin resistance or those who have prediabetes or diabetes. When we're talking about nutritional aspects, blood sugar management is key because insulin resistance is usually present, along with some other things such as facial hair loss, difficulty losing weight, acne, sometimes longer time to conceive or infertility can be at play here with PCOS. And so blood sugar management, I would say, is the top one to investigate with PCOS. And some other like little hot tips that are fun to share. If you're someone who has PCOS and experiences that facial hair, having spearmint tea, 2 cups a day, that can reduce androgens in your body and reduce acne and facial hair. And usually those with PCOS also run low in certain micronutrients. So like vitamin D, zinc, magnesium. So really doing a comprehensive blood panel and making sure those are in good standing too.
I think a really common nutritional strategy that some people use is low carb or keto. I think in the clinic, we've had people use more of like a diabetic type diet or a diet for people with diabetes in that scenario. Is there merit to any of these?
Mm, I never recommend keto. So whenever it's brought up, I'm like, it's so extreme and not sustainable. So I usually cringe. And if it works for someone here and there, great. Usually I pose the question up front, do you want to do this for the rest of your life? If the answer is no, then why are we doing this now for a temporary crash diet? PCOS, when there is a diagnosis, a lot of people jump the gun and they just want to do low to no carb. And that also
Yes.
usually isn't sustainable. And so usually it's low to moderate carb. So I think there is some substantiation there when it comes to that recommendation. It's usually slightly lower than the general recommendations of 45 to 65% of the diet. I see a lot of success with 35 to 40% of the diet, but it really is dependent on the individual's activity level, their individual needs, and then also their caloric needs. So making sure they're getting enough for their brain and other organ systems too.
One possible external factor when it comes to polycystic ovarian syndrome risk is exposure to microplastics, which could increase the risk of cysts. Is that part of this equation at all? Do we have evidence for that?
Yeah, there was a recent study, and I will say that it was a small study of 18 women. It was conducted in Salerno, Italy, at an IVF clinic. And this was released in February of 2025. And it displayed that the majority of the women in this study had microplastics found in their ovaries. And so I think we are coming to a place where we are finding it built up in the human body and how it doesn't dissolve, disintegrate. So this is something to be mindful of. I don't know if you've heard of this, receipts at the store and
Yeah.
all of these fear-mongering things.
Yeah.
There are going to be toxins or chemicals anywhere you go in modern day living. So it's impossible to avoid at all costs. And if we wanted to start somewhere, I would say maybe switching your plastic cutting boards at home. Because if you think about it, when you're cutting on them, you're actively cutting into the plastic, which can get into your food. So that's a great place to start of swapping your plastic cutting board to maybe a wood one or a different material.
Swapping your Tupperware or your food storage containers to glass, or especially not heating in plastic ones.
100%. Yep. Great place to start.
Let's talk about endometriosis. So, what is this and what's happening in the body?
Yeah, this is another common one that plagues people who menstruate. So, endometriosis is it's where uterine-like tissue grows outside of the uterus, and that can be quite painful. So, if you think about something growing in your body in a place that it's not meant to grow, that tissue can cause a lot of inflammation and pain for that individual. Similar to like I mentioned earlier with the prostaglandins being in that area, it can also impact the bladder. A lot of people with endometriosis have bladder issues or even digestive issues because that uterine tissue can be growing in that region. They have even found uterine like tissue growing in all different places of the body. So, like someone's eyeball or someone's ear. They're thinking it may be linked to maybe an autoimmune condition or there's something else at play. So, for these women, yeah, there can be a lot of inflammation and pain at play, including heavy periods.
Do you point them to an anti-inflammatory, or at Mayo, we just use the Mediterranean diet in that respect? Is that what you do for them nutritionally?
I always like to start with what we can add to the diet rather than
Yes.
remove, because no one wants things taken away from them. So, focusing on nutrition by addition, what can we add from this list of foods that are from the Mediterranean diet or anti inflammatory? And then, similar to PCOS, those with endo are lower in certain nutrients traditionally: vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, selenium. And this can be very supportive of the anti-inflammatory diet, and then supportive of ovulation and the menstrual cycle. Then secondary to that, if we're thinking of what's causing that inflammation that can support lowering it, dairy-free is usually the first line of intervention. If someone's not ready for it, we have to acknowledge when someone's like not in a stage of readiness, that's okay. Like I like my cheese too, I get it. Don't take my cheese away from me. But I can rephrase that to dairy light. Okay, then let's reduce the amount of dairy in your diet. Dairy isn't inherently bad. it can be inflammatory for those with inflammatory conditions. Some thrive off of gluten-free, but once again, we need this to be sustainable. So like, is that right for you? And usually the first line of defense is dairy-free, Mediterranean, anti-inflammatory.
With some of these more restrictive parameters, so something like dairy-free or gluten-free, do you ever have people reintroduce and assess any changes in symptoms?
It's usually the gold standard to do an elimination diet for 2 to 6 weeks, however long you can do it, and then reintroduce. And usually the reintroduction needs to be strategic. So choose one food, yogurt, and then you start with a very small serving, maybe a half cup. And then the next day you would do a cup. And then the day after you would do a cup and a half. No other dairy during that isolated time. If you have any symptoms that arise that could be indicative you're sensitive to, specifically yogurt, because there are some people who can tolerate certain types of dairy than
Milk
others.
versus yogurt.
No, exactly. Usually people are pretty attuned with their body and know what that inflammation feels like, whether that's a sense of like heaviness or feeling bloated and puffy. They can have what's called a flare. So it's pretty obvious. And if that's the case, it's usually confirmation like, oh, this food doesn't make me feel good.
I would actually much rather someone do that type of experiment and have a bad day or a few bad days versus being overly restrictive and saying, okay, I think I should do gluten-free, dairy-free, and that may not be useful or helpful. And now we just eliminated a source of your fiber. We eliminated a huge source of your calcium and vitamin D. Now I'm getting more concerned about how to help you meet those nutrients.
100%. I agree with that. Yeah, because then there's the risk of like losing out on nutrient opportunities if you do prefer some of those sources.
Danielle, thank you so much for all of your wisdom and all of the social media debunking that I threw at you. I think it is an important topic. I think women's health needs to be discussed more. So I really just want to thank you for all of the knowledge that you have. I just love it.
Yeah, it was lovely being here. I'm really passionate about it and advocating for women, especially because we know studies on women haven't been done for very long, the last like 30 something years. So we're playing catch up here and happy to share this information.
Polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS, isn't anyone's fault. It's not caused by sugar or lifestyle choices, and management often begins with improving blood sugar regulation. Nutritionally, that means focusing on balanced meals, moderate carbs, and nutrients like vitamin D, magnesium, and zinc. And if you're dealing with symptoms like acne or excess hair growth, 2 cups of spearmint tea a day may help. Endometriosis is a painful condition where uterine tissue grows outside of the uterus. But anti-inflammatory Mediterranean-style diets can help reduce symptoms with a focus on vitamins C, D, E, and selenium. Reducing dairy may help, but an elimination diet should be short-term and carefully reintroduced to prevent nutrition deficiencies. Women's health research has only been a serious focus in the last few decades. So remember, understanding why and how your body does what it does isn't just empowering, it's essential. That's all for this episode. But if you have a follow-up question, leave us a voicemail at 507-538-6272, and we'll answer it in a future episode. For more On Nutrition episodes and resources, check us out online at mayoclinic.org/onnutrition. And if you found this show helpful, please subscribe and make sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. It really helps others find our show. Thanks for listening. And until next time, eat well and be well.
If you're a podcast host, listen up, this one's for you. My name is Allie Jackson. I'm the host of Finding Mr. Height, a dating and relationship podcast that I've been doing for 4 years now, sharing my positive and practical approach to dating that's built on my own life experience. And I wanted to share another experience that I've had, my secret behind monetizing my show. It's called Red Circle, and I was just telling my colleague about how much I love their platform. With Red Circle, not only am I getting a seamless hosting experience, but I also love the support I receive in ad sales. It's not just typical ad sales either. It's targeted targeted opportunities based on my show and my life. And the platform is super simple. You just set your preferences and Red Circle matches you with sponsors that align with your show. You can vet every opportunity and their platform gives you great analytics. More recently too, my Red Circle team has brought me opportunities outside of my podcast on social media to really augment the podcast partnerships, bring them full circle. I just can't recommend them enough. If you want to give it a try, go to redcircle.com to get your free trial. That's redcircle.com for a free trial.